Okay, good evening, everybody. We're going to call to order a public hearing on the Committee of Infrastructure on today, Wednesday, November 23rd, 2018, at 7 p.m. in the Aldermatic Chamber. Can the clerk please call the roll?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Alderman Tom Lopez. Here. Alderman Jan Schmidt is here. Alderman Ernie Jetty. Here. And Alderman Ked Gidge is out this evening. I believe he's unwell. And Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien, Chair.
Thank you. I did hear from Alderman Ken Gidge, and he did give a proper excuse for missing tonight's meeting. At this particular point, we're going to allow a presentation be conducted by Director Marchand. And, excuse me, and for the record, we forgot to mention, can put on the record, Alderman Brandon Laws will be in attendance, okay? And also, too, at this particular point, I think we were not at a quorum. I think I can appoint you as Alderman at Large as a voting member of the board, so we'll reflect that. Okay, very good. So in case something happens, we got you on record. Very good. All right, again, we're going to have receiving public testimony, but so that we all know and can be briefed about it and make informed decisions, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Director Marchand at this time, and she's going to make a little slide presentation to brief us all. So, Director Marchand, please.
Thank you, Alderman O'Brien. I'd like to introduce Kevin Gagne of Stantec, who has been the engineer on this project and works on boat projects all over the state of New Hampshire. So we're here to talk to you about the Greeley Park Boat Ramp project. There's a little delay in the thing. So for those of you who are not aware, you can't actually get to this boat ramp by getting to Greeley Park off of Concord Street. It is not a walk through the park to get there. The access point for this park is down Hills Ferry Road, and the piece of land is actually on the other side of the railroad tracks. It is between the railroad tracks and the river. And so that is where the existing boat ramp is, that is in pretty rough shape. And that's what we are here to talk about tonight, the improvements to this. So just as a quick history on where we've been and how we got here, the Department of Public Works is a very big partner in this project, along with the fire department and certainly community development. And so for many years, this has been going on in the background. It is one of the few public access sites on the Merrimack River, and it is a very important site for both emergency purposes and just for general public access to the river. But it has been in very bad condition, and there's been a lot of uncertainty over the railroad crossing in the past. Before the Waterways Manager position was created in the city, the Waterways Committee, I believe several members are here tonight, included in their report, one of their high priorities was to redevelop this boat ramp site. And so in bringing a Waterways Manager into the city, we applied for a Land and Water Conservation Fund grant, which was tentatively given based on the city resolving the railroad crossing issue. The issue was, is the crossing public or is it private? We went through a petition process with New Hampshire DOT and the railroad. It was determined that it is a public crossing and therefore we can use it. And so we were awarded the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant in the amount of $400,000 total. 50% of that $200,000 is from the Land and Water Conservation Fund. 50% is a match from the city, which has already been appropriated. And so we kicked off the project early in 2018 with some public outreach. We had a meeting on a very cold day, I think last February, and went out for RFP on engineering, design, permitting, and that has led us to where we are today. Some of the initial things we heard from the neighborhood and the community was to try and outline goals for the project, and those are to resurface and regrade the boat ramp, relocate the stormwater outfall, which you will see in some pictures if you haven't been there, that you can kind of see it underneath the words access road. It sticks out on the downstream flow of the river, and so it's very hard to keep your boat from smashing into it. Develop a parking area. Right now people just park under trees and wherever you can fit. Provide emergency access for fire and police. Improve accessibility for all users, possibly improve and reroute the access road. That is in the plans right now, funding contingent. and maintain the natural aesthetic. It was incredibly important to the neighborhood that this stay feeling pretty rural, and so we've worked hard to keep it that way. The other thing that's really important that's not on this list to the neighborhood is adequate signage on Hills Ferry Road to make sure that people can see the turn and we don't have cars and boats with trailers in the neighborhood. And so that is something that we've promised as part of this as well, but in preliminary design is not necessarily going to be shown on the plans tonight. So here are some pictures of existing conditions of the ramp. These are from nicer weather than today, but you can see the ramp is in pretty rough condition. It is very difficult to get a boat in and out of. You can see the large stone head wall from the stormwater drain, both here and here. This is a very low water flow picture, but if the water was up here, it's hard to see this, and it's very easy for your boat to swing into it as the water flows this way. And this is the parking area, just parking underneath the trees as it exists currently. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kevin at this point.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, I'm going to talk briefly about the composition of the existing site that you can see in this photograph, and we've given this sort of out-looking view here so that when we get to the next slide, you'll see the site itself, the proposed site, and you'll get some perspective as to how much of the area of the site we're actually utilizing to provide this access facility. The existing site here is a total of 32 acres. It's largely wooded, so 30.8 acres of that site is currently vegetated. And impervious areas, which consists of this gravel access road and the existing disturbed area around the boat launch, which is gravel and broken pavement, which you saw in the photographs, consists of about 1.61 acres. The next slide then will show the extent of the site footprint, the proposed site. Now, the proposed site, you can see, has a new access road alignment that shortens the distance greatly from the existing entry access road to the proposed site, almost a straight line after you've traveled a couple hundred feet from the entrance. The purpose for this is multifold. We're working with local emergency responders, coordinating the site design and the location of that access road, because this is the primary or the only location in this area where they can get a watercraft in for water rescue, whether it's someone who fell in on the river while they were fishing, or boating, kayaking, and whatnot. So when we move on and I talk a little bit about the design itself, keep in mind that all the turning movements and the way we've oriented the site for backing into the ramp is also not just for boat trailers and canoe kayakers. It's also for the city's emergency vehicles. So what we'd be proposing to do here is gate off the existing road right at that point that Sarah's pointing out, where the new access road takes off, and also gate it at the site itself. So it will remain available for emergency access and also as a foot trail. So what we're proposing to do is to actually take several feet of that existing wide gravel roadway and revegetate it and let it basically turn back to an undisturbed forested segment, thereby reducing the impervious area on the site and making more of a woods walking trail. It will be just wide enough, though, for maintenance pickup trucks to access. So the next slide then just sort of zooms in on the site. You can see, if you look around the existing access road, you see this little green footprint. That's the area that I was talking about, revegetating the existing access road. And then you'll see green all around the site itself. That's essentially the footprint of grading and disturbance that's required to get the proposed layout graded to meet existing. And that's all going to be vegetated and go back to sort of a natural, revert to a natural state. It's not intended to be although the color appears to be that of grass, it's not going to be grass that's maintained and mowed and that sort of thing. It's the intent for all the vegetation on the site is to use low maintenance natural vegetation so that essentially it becomes part of the landscape. So with the proposed site that you see there, the proposed green space that we're going to be restoring from disturbed areas and the addition of the or the reduction of the existing gravel roads width, this whole project results in only just slightly more than 1/2 of an acre of impervious area added to the site. So 0.6 acres becomes impervious that was formerly pervious. The site itself provides 24 total parking spaces. 12 of those spaces are for vehicles with trailers, and 12 are what we would call car top accessible. So that's for people that are bringing canoes and kayaks on their roof. The one of each type will also be van accessible. So that means there'll be an 8-foot unusable lane right next to the van accessible parking spot to increase the accessibility of the site for all users. The overall approach to designing the site is to take a low-impact design approach, and what that means is we try to follow the existing topography to the extent possible. We try to follow the existing drainage patterns that are out there. We divide the site up by pitching and changing grade in different directions so that we can collect water in smaller localized areas. So each of those 4 areas you see in blue are small bioretention areas. They're basically small depressions with natural vegetation that will collect water as it's broken up and divided amongst the site, and then treat that water, and then eventually allow it to seep into the ground, or in the case of an overflow condition, it will drain out to the lake after the river after the initial storm has been treated. The site itself employs a 45-degree angle of the parking spaces. It's a one-way circulation clockwise around the site. That allows people to get oriented in the most user-friendly way to back up a trailer, which is when you can see it outside your driver's side window as you make that reverse movement down into the ramp. Then you pull directly into one of the parking spaces. Because of the angle, it's easy to get in and then back out, and again, circulate and get yourself in position. The only wetland impact on the site is the area where the ramp itself meets the water. So it's quite a small footprint of impact. It's very typical of the permitting we do for the boat launches throughout the state. We also have to get a permit called the Shore Land Permit, which is for the work we're doing beyond the top of the bank. And then the third permit we will be getting is called the Alteration of Terrain Permit, which is going to be very much focused on our addressing the stormwater on the site. So that's why we're employing this approach that you see here. We have a very interesting add to this project. It's the little white area that you see right there. It's called a pre-launch platform. It's an ADA accessible platform where, let's say a family arrives, they have a boater who's also using a wheelchair. What that is it's an ADA accessible wheelchair ramp that goes up to a multi-level platform that's open on one side. The person can, and there's a van accessible space just prior to it, so the person can get out of the vehicle. They can wheelchair up to one of 2 levels depending on the height of the boat on the trailer. Then the driver pulls the trailer boat right up to the edge of the platform. They can then load themselves into the boat, any gear, family can bring the gear up the ramp as well and put that into the boat from the truck if they like, and then the person can actually launch the boat. This allows accessibility in a way that you can't provide because of the topography of this site, where it's it's about 15% from the water all the way up to that first loop road, which is well beyond the length of the ramp. So it's pretty far, and it's a very unique solution to this kind of situation. It's not been done in New Hampshire yet, although I got the idea from the person I work with at the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department as a consultant designing the state's boat launches. So this is something that is being done and used widely in the state of Washington and Montana. And so that's where we're working with designers and borrowing sort of details and approaches for designing this sort of system. So that's essentially the project in a nutshell. We're open to any questions, any level of detail you'd like to discuss. This particular plan here is the more engineered plan. It has all the grading, the topography, proposed and existing, and then the ramp profile, as well as a detailed.
I do have pictures of the ramp.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I forgot that we had these at the end. So that's what one looks like. That's bigger than ours because that one is on essentially level ground. And in order to get an 80 accessible ramp, you can only go on a 1 in 12 slope for 30-foot maximum before you have to have a level landing. Though the situation we have with our grading and the site's topography is that the road that the vehicle will be pulling up next to this is going downward. So while the road is going down and that ramp is going up in 1 in 12, it cuts the distance that is actually needed to get up to that elevation difference between the boat and the platform, almost in half. So we have a very small footprint in comparison, but these pictures are from out west, and we wanted to give you a sense of what that looks like.
Okay.
Just quickly, the timeline for the project. We're here before you, presenting for hopefully a recommendation for approval tonight. We will move on to final design plans and permitting with the goal of getting this out to bid in not too long, over the winter months, to get the best pricing. Earlier in the winter is better for us. And then to issue the bid, as it says, and hopefully to have the project under construction this summer.
I do have a question, perhaps maybe to Kevin.
Yep.
Is that a viable, while we're doing this project, is that a viable angle to the boat ramp? Because we do it, and I was in charge of the dive team when I was on the fire department, and we use it a lot, and it is a little challenging, you know what I mean? And I just hope when it becomes popular, to which I hope this does, you know what I mean, because we have such a beautiful resource here to use, that it can be used by, hopefully, I hate to see a car backslide now, or a pickup truck, more likely. So just your thoughts on it.
So you're talking about the pitch of the ramp itself,
The pitch
or
of
the
the ramp
angle
itself.
of the back turn? So the pitch is exactly the optimal pitch for the ramp, which is 15%. See, here's the issue you run into. This is why 15% works perfect for your typical vehicle on a boat trailer. As you're backing the trailered vehicle down the ramp, you want to get to a position where the boat begins to float off the trailer in the water before your truck's exhaust is underwater.
Right.
And so if the flatter the ramp is, the further you have to go out to get the water depth, and you end up with your truck underwater. So 15%, we'd shoot for 12 to 15%, 15 being ideal, for exactly that reason. So it gets you to deeper water quicker before your tires and your exhaust are underwater. And you have the other reason for going to as deep a water as you can, before your vehicle's underwater, is that people tend to use a practice called power loading, which is not helpful to the longevity of the ramp. But they'll really rev up their engines when they're pulling out or pulling in and getting on or off the trailer, and that creates great force. It can undermine concrete plank ramps.
Right.
But it's far less damaging when you have proper 3 to 4 foot water depth at the end. So 15% also provides that.
And we could post on that no power.
Yeah, it's a huge problem, but because we've been doing, myself personally, since '02 with the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department, designing ramps, we've designed a sort of plank, a precast concrete plank that is used as sort of a modular building block system for ramps. We've designed these planks in such a way with weight and size and configuration that they butt up against each other, but yet easy to install. And they create a concrete shield across the entire footprint of the ramp to protect against that power loading. So it's something we've been evolving to address for many years, as well as ice damage and other things that you could see at a site like this. We've kind of got the optimal ramp design approach for dealing with these things.
If I may, just one more question to Director Marchand. The fire department, when they use this, because it is really the only place they can really
Absolutely.
gain access to even the Nashua River, for the lower section with the dam. Parking availability, and it's not a deal breaker now, but as we move on in this project, I would recommend maybe designating an area where that they could, the fire department can access, at least park the vehicles while they're, more direct access and in case of an emergency. And, that there is enough designated space and be properly marked that if the parking lot becomes overflowed, that it suits emergency vehicle only, needs, so they can have a place to go.
Excellent point, and that was one of their concerns in the fire department. That's one of the reasons why they want this. I can't get to it. They want the old trail gated but still maintained, and they can open it up right by the boat ramp there. So they
Right.
felt like they could open that gate and park down there in case of course, it'll happen on the busiest day, right, when all the parking spaces are filled. And so they felt like they could use the access road as well for extra backup parking. But yes, we will certainly take that into consideration going forward.
Not so much anymore, but I had a lot of brush fires along the tracks from those squeaky trail brakes, so
Yeah.
whatever, train brakes, I should say. I'll open up to any other member of the committee that has a question. Alderman Jettie.
So you mentioned those 4 ponds
Yes.
that they would treat the water.
Yes.
How do they treat the water?
So what happens is the treatment occurs below the bottom of the pond. You have several layers of materials that are designed to control the rate at which the water seeps through them, and then also to filter and clean the water. So it's going to consist of a certain mixture of sand and compost so you have a mixture of organic materials and sand that you have these biological processes happening within the soil as the water sits and slowly percolates through. But then you also have the natural processes that occur with the vegetation itself in the surface. So the intent is that the media that you place underneath acts as a filter. It creates an environment for biological organisms bugs essentially that actually eat certain nutrients, I guess, from stormwater runoff. And then you have controlled rate of percolation through that media, so the water stays in it ponds in the surface for a desired amount of time, let's say, so that the plants and vegetation that are within that can also take up, through transpiration and other natural processes, evaporation, the vegetation within the little rain garden has its role as well. So it's kind of a well-known concept called bioretention. So it's the combination of the filter media and the plants that are within. Trying to mimic what the forest does naturally is really what's happening.
So once it's built, it's, I don't know if passive is the right word, but it just happens.
Absolutely, and that's a great point. It's part of the low-impact design approach, the reason being that it doesn't require a lot of maintenance. So it does just become part of the landscape. The only maintenance that's required over time it is possible, that, I mean, it's a gravel roadway surface. So some of that gravel, although we divided up the grading in such a way as to not allow water to run too far for too long on the gravel surface so that it starts to erode that gravel. That's why we break it up to 4 or 5 different areas instead of just allowing it to all go in one direction. So we try to minimize just through design the amount of gravel that's going to come off. But certainly some gravel in really rough rainstorms can wash off the surface and go into those ponds. So on a yearly basis, and this is part of the alteration of terrain permit, we'll have to have a maintenance plan. So on a yearly basis, that should be some of that sediment that accumulates should be removed.
Okay, if I,
Follow-up, yes? Mhm.
and you said that that the excess would flow into the river. How would it get there? Would it just flow over the land, or is it going to be
Use
piped?
this as a
Or
pointer. So what we have, this one here overflows right at this point, and there's a swale, so it just goes over land along here, okay? So it travels here and goes directly into this one. This one then does have a pipe. There's a natural depression, a really large one. That's where the existing pipe is coming out that goes here and goes here that you saw in the photo. There's an existing pipe that goes to a manhole here and to a large natural depression here. So we're allowing the overflow from this one to pipe into this existing depression, where then if it reaches a certain level, it can actually go out the existing pipe, or as we're evaluating and as Sarah mentioned, we may be able to eliminate that pipe altogether and allow overflow from there to go over land down the side of the ramp. Now that is a very deep, very large natural depression that's there. And talking to Nick and others in the city, they said, as long as they've been around, they've never seen it full of water. I mean, it's really deep. And all of the area that contributes to it, it's just not enough to fill it. So we're not expecting that, but we would be providing for it. Now, this one that you see at the bottom, I think my mouse is...
pauses from there.
Oh, okay,
It's okay.
slow. So that one, this one is on the bottom, has an overflow that goes, a pipe that comes underneath and actually daylights into a swale that's coming along this edge and going along that side of the ramp. So that is and we're talking small pipes. You know, these are small areas, small watersheds that contribute to them, so small pipes coming out. So that's where that one would overflow to. Now this one would overflow into a small structure, a small PVC basin that's about 18 inches wide. It has a pipe below the ground, and that would also go into the depression. That's the existing one here
which one?
as an overflow. So this one here, which is in the middle, that one. So that one would have, the reason we use pipes rather than, in some cases we use pipes rather than just letting it overflow at the top, is we can set the elevation of the grate on that small structure exactly where we want based on the calculations to control how much the water can pond before it spills out. So that's, these are just small little PVC devices essentially. It's not the kind of structure you're thinking of when you think of drainage out here on the roadways, big concrete structures with pipes. And these are small PVC pipes that have outlets formed in them. A yard drain, we often call them. So each one of these is, the top three are essentially interconnected and at the end in the existing depression north of the ramp, and the southernmost one has a small outlet that goes ramp side. So those outlets, it's the first flush of water that tends to wash things off the surface that you're treating for. And that is ponded in each of these basins. That is not going to that outlet structure. That is going through the treatment media and then into the ground. It's possible, based on our recent geotech evaluations, that we may also have to have an underdrain system in case the groundwater gets too high or that percolation rate is sort of being inundated in a large storm. But either way, if we have an underdrain system, it's going to be the water that goes through the treatment system before it goes out. So the only thing that would then overflow into these devices and go into eventually the river is that which has been beyond the initial flush that our goal is to treat.
Okay. And could I have one more? Will there be any kind of structure, like when people get their boat into the water, will there be any kind of a dock or pier or something that allows people to get from land into the boat?
No, and there's a good reason for that. That's an entirely separate set of wetlands permitting, but the ice freeze-thaw pattern here is pretty tremendous, the power of the water here. It isn't something that we have the grant funding to do, and it would have to be something that would have to be removed every year. And so that is not a maintenance thing that we're able to take on at this point either, never mind the lack of funding for it.
It's a tremendous cost and almost an unmeetable challenge in the Merrimack River. If you want to see what it takes to do that, you can go down to the one in Lowell where you'll see guide piles that you can't even get your arms around in terms of the size that's required. And we have one or two fishing game boat launches on lakes that don't have the same kind of flow forces that we could deal with here, and those piles in many cases have been destroyed or uprooted from nature's forces, and talking about $60,000-$70,000 to put two of them back in, twice that, to 3 times that to put them in and build a dock structure that's going to work here. Well, that's why we started looking at these alternatives like that ADA accessible platform to accommodate accessibility in a different way.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other member of the committee have a question? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your presentation. Please stand by. I am now going to open up to the public hearing on R18-087. And anybody that wants to come to the microphone, it's going to be in 2 parts of testimony in favor and testimony in opposition. So if there was a rebuttal that you wanted to make, even though you already spoke, you may speak at the second time when we go and when I accept the testimony. So I am now willing to accept any testimony in favor. Anybody want to come to the microphone? Can you please give your name and residence and your organization, please, for the record?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Gene Porter. I live at 77 Concord Street in Nashua for the last 25 years. I've followed this project for a number of years, and the first thing I want to do is compliment the city staff at having diligently taken on some serious challenges here, not the least of which dealing with a railroad that refused to recognize that Hills Ferry Road had been a public right-of-way for 200 years. And the city almost had to go to court to get that agreement in writing, and has also had to deal internally with problems on storm drain relocations, what have you. So it's taken a while, but I'm very glad to see where we are. My organization is the Lower Merrimack River Local Advisory Committee, of which I'm the chairman, and I am a strong promoter of public use of the Lower Merrimack River. This river down here from the brewery down to Pawtucket Dam, if it were a lake, it would be about the 8th or 10th largest lake in New Hampshire, and the only one without any modern boat access. And that was recognized by the State Public Water Access Advisory Board 2 years ago, who put public access to this piece of water at the top of its priority list. And I can speak on their behalf to say that they're very pleased that this project is going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further testimony in favor?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. My name's Francis Murphy. I live at 72 Berkeley Street. I'm actually a member of Gene's committee, but I'm wearing another hat as well. I'm a member of this organization called the Friends of Greeley Park. We informally keep an eye on things in Greeley Park, making sure there's no additional infrastructure things in place. But I attended several of these informational sessions that Chairman Marchand so expertly chaired, and we raised a couple of other issues that I'm wondering if they're still on the list. One, we wanted to make sure that the curfew was in place, that it was like the park itself, it's dawn to dusk use. And consistent with that, there wouldn't be any lighting, I believe, on the access road to the ramp, will deter nighttime use of the ramp and keep it consistent with that curfew of dawn to dusk. And there was one other issue that was raised was presently there are informal sort of pathways, roadways within that section of Greeley Park used by ATVs and big-wheeled pickup trucks. They love, from my experience, I've seen them, they love to use it in wet weather when there's a lot of mud, which creates a lot of tearing up of the soil, erosion. And there was some discussion that there'd be some sort of blocks put where that it wouldn't have the easy access for the ATVs and pickups to go off-road and tear up the landscape. But beyond those points, and I hope they're still in the plan, so to speak, I'm very much in favor of the boat ramp for the reasons Gene said. We see as more public use of the river will be informal watchdogs for the health of the river and preserve a magnificent resource we have in Hillsborough County. Thanks.
Very good, thank you. Any other testimony in favor? Okay, seeing none, we'll close testimony in favor and open it up for testimony in opposition. Seeing none, I'll pose the second part of testimony in favor. Seeing everybody has already spoken, I will close the testimony, second part of in favor, to now open testimony in opposition. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on R18087. Do I hear a motion, Alderman Lopez?
Adjourn.
Okay, thank you. A motion to adjourn at 19:37. That'll be 7:37.
Thank you.
At this particular time, if everybody's comfortable, we can get right into the regular committee meeting, which is only one thing on it, is R18087. So if anybody needs a break, we could take a quick 5-minute break, but if the present company want to keep going, we can keep going. I know everybody, I just want to say, I know several of the people here in attendance, as far as aldermen, had several things or matters of, personal things to do and everything, and I really appreciate you coming to this and giving us a quorum here tonight, and I'm sure Director Marchand is more than grateful to to have this done, so to get it done, so very good. All right, so without any further objections, I'll open up the meeting on Committee of Infrastructure on Wednesday, November 28th, 2018 at 7:38 in the Aldermanic Chamber. Can the clerk please call the roll?
Certainly, sir. Alderman Tom Lopez. Here. Alderman Jan Schmidt is here. Alderman Ernie Jettie. Here. Alderman Ken Gidge is not here. And we have our chair, Michael O'Brien.
And can the record please reflect that Alderman Gidge has been properly excused, and also in his absence, we have Alderman Laws. Okay. At this particular time, we'll open up for public comment. Good, seeing none. Communications.
We have none.
Unfinished business.
Also none.
New business resolutions.
We have R18087, approving the preliminary design and construction of Greeley Park boat ramp. I move for final recommendation.
Final passages, very good. Okay. Any questions by any of the aldermen regarding the motion of final passage? Alderman Lopez.
I just had a question about the security lighting that was discussed. If Director Marchand could describe what the plan is?
Yes, and thank you very much to Mr. Murphy for bringing that back up. There are, the curfew will be in place. This is considered Greeley Park, so the existing curfew does remain in place for the boat ramp. There will be no lighting as part of this project. There will be no lighting on the ramp or at the boat parking area. And we have promised that we would place boulders, natural things to deter people from parking along, from entering the woods along the edge of the road in that area. Yes.
Okay. And Alderman Jettie, did you have your hand up?
I did, but that was the same
Okay,
question. What,
yeah. Uh-huh.
what assurances that do we have? I'm trying to bring up the the proposed ordinance or resolution, whatever it is that we're discussing. And I can't do it, but I'm wondering, lights, curfew, and barriers to recreation, ATVs and stuff. You mentioned them, but is there anything that we can put in the resolution, or that we need to put in the resolution or the ordinance that would?
Well,
I think, but
I don't want to put that in.
we will be putting those in, and it will be part of the planning board approval. So it will be on the site plan as part of the planning board approval. This has more steps before it's done. And so, yes, that will be part of the final plan. I can just tell you that. I don't know that it needs to be part of the resolution.
and I think if I may, and I'll research this, but other than private property, I just can't take my snowmobile and go up Woodfield Street, although it would be fun and a challenge during the snowstorm, because it's not a properly designated area. And I think the state RSA's go with ATV uses, that it has to be within a certain, area. So I think our area there would come under that. But I think that's a state law, and we'll need to look at that as far as off-road vehicle usage.
Well, if I may, in spite of whatever state law or city ordinance may prohibit it, obviously, it sounds like people are using it. So these physical barriers are,
Oh, I
Would
don't
be
disagree.
required,
People
yeah.
are scofflaws. I guess we can all
Yeah.
understand that. The law says one thing and people choose not to follow it. There's not much one can do. To do barriers and signage, which I think is really the key. And then also, too, the follow-up is maybe have discussions with MPD to pay attention as such, because this is a valuable asset, and make sure that it stays nice and clean and healthy and for family usage and everything. And I don't think four-wheeled ATVs is what the answer is up there. No. Alderman Lopez.
Same reason, I would not want to actually put in the ordinance that we're not going to ever put lights in there, because if it turns out that there's some kind of criminal use of the boat launch, or the ATVs can't be controlled or something, we might need to at some future point do that, and it would be a setback or a delay if we have to go through the ordinance to do it. If we just put it in the design right now, not to put any lights in, it's not like we come up with money for lights every 10 minutes. The last time we tried to do it for the rail trail, it took months, so I would just not want to create another barrier if we don't have to.
Right. Good point. Anybody else? Okay, if seeing no objection, I'll call the question. All those in favor of for final passage of R18087 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Seeing none. R18087 passes. Now turn to the clerk. New business ordinances.
We have none.
Public comment. Seeing none. Remarks by the alderman. Seeing none. And Alderman Lopez.
I would like to move to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn at 7:43. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Nothing